This is Horror Podcast.
Welcome to This is Horror, a podcast for readers, writers, and creators. I'm Michael David Wilson, and every episode, alongside my co-host Bob Pastorella, we chat with masters of horror about writing, life lessons, creativity, and much more. Now, today's guest is Michael J. Seidlinger, rejoining us for the third and final part of our epic conversation. As with all of these episodes, though, you can listen in any order, so by all means listen to this one now and then go back to 454 and 455 when you're done. Now, Michael is a Filipino American author of books including his latest one from Clash, Anybody Home, and it is absolutely fantastic. And he has also written for a number of publications, including Wired, Buzzfeed, The Observer, and Publishers Weekly. Now, in this part of the conversation, we talk about literary agents, we talk about his literary agent, Lane Haymont, we talk about his fantastic novel, My Pet Serial Killer, we talk about his current work in progress, and indeed what Michael should be kinder to himself about. But before any of that, a little bit of an advert break.
Tinnitus Press presents Lure, a novella of otherworldly folk horror by Tim McGregor. In a fishing village on an alien shore hang the bones of ancient forsaken gods. The arrival of a new god brings descent and madness and threatens to tear the starving community apart. Against a backdrop of brine and blood, Lure blurs the line between natural disaster and self-destruction. Eric LaRocca calls Lure a monstrously inventive fable, immersive and utterly compelling. Pre-order at tinnituspress.com now. Lure is out July 18th.
Hello. This is Sarah Pimborough. Very much looking forward to being at Horror on Main. I fully expect to see you all there. I want to see every single one of you there. Thank you very much. Very excited. Bye.
Horror on Main, a new weekend convention for the horror community. We explore all the shadows within horror entertainment, including writers and actors, but also artists, publishers, directors, and composers. We've been going to conventions for over 20 years and are changing up the little things to make the big picture amazing. Join us Memorial Day weekend 2023 in Hunt Valley, Maryland. Come to the block party and meet your new neighbors. See horroronmain.com for details.
Now, if you're enjoying these adverts and you're thinking, ooh, I'd like to have my advert featured on This Is Horror podcast. Well, good news, folks, you can. Just drop me a line, Michael at thisishorror.co.uk, and let's talk. Let's see what we can arrange, what we can work out in terms of advertising. And if you've been on the edge about getting advertising, now is a fantastic time, because at the end of the month, we are putting up our advertising rates. But if you buy adverts now, you can lock in those old rates. And you don't need to use them now. So if you wanted, you could buy 2, 3, even 4 months. Well, you could buy as many months as you want of advertising, and then you could use it next year or even the year after. So if you want to lock in these original rates before they go up at the end of the month, drop me a line, Michael at thisishorror.co.uk. Well, with that said, from one Michael to another, it's time for the third part of our conversation with Michael J. Seidlinger on This Is Horror. It's interesting too, and I'm not entirely sure how I'm gonna phrase this, which is maybe a mistake. Just start talking before I've formulated exactly what I'm gonna talk about. But of course, perhaps nowhere else is it so apparent that we are performers and putting on a persona than on social media, which is the great bad and good of our time. For all of us, it's done so many kind of positive things, but so many detrimental things. I mean, particularly as people working with independent publishers and as independent artists. I mean, it's such a good way to kind of get your work out there and in front of people, and to reach people that you wouldn't have. I mean, probably without social media, the three of us wouldn't be having this conversation now, and without technology, we certainly wouldn't be having this conversation with both of you in America, albeit different states, and me in Japan. But I mean, goodness, how do you cultivate using social media in a way that will be positive to you rather than ultimately detrimental to your well-being and your health?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question, because so many artists, writers, they create their own, quote unquote brand online, and they work through it that way, and they like try to chase some sense of relevancy, and then there's the whole quote unquote discourse that is usually just a bunch of drama that happens every 50, like it's seemingly there's some new outrage every other minute. And then, people can get caught up in it. Like for me, I definitely was very, very, very online for a lot of my, like up until maybe like 3 years ago, maybe maybe a year or two before the pandemic or something like that. I just like quote unquote lived online. So meaning like I would document anything that's happening in my actual life. I would, pretty much always be like checking my phone or checking whatever on my laptop. And, I was a little bit more conscious of some kind of idea of what I would want to be online, because there's no one that's not doing that. If you're online, you can say you're just being yourself, but also when you say you're being yourself, you're actually being your social media self, which is still curated through the fact of you're sitting there and choosing and focusing on what you're actually going to say via that tweet, via that post, via that whatever it is. But in recent times, I made a conscious effort of being like, all right, this is very bad on my health. Like I just definitely knew that I started realizing that I was living through actual real experiences with this sort of filter of like, how do I document it online? And that scared me a little bit. And in recent times for me personally, I've just basically pulled back, and I use my social media mostly just to talk about writing, talk about, the books I'm working on, and share the articles I've written for work. And I'm of the mindset now that we're definitely at this stage with social media where the halcyon days are over. It's now even more of a public forum where the loudest people are going to be the journalists and the ones that are, and I'm thinking of course explicitly of Twitter here, they're going to be the journalists and the people and the politicians and stuff like that are talking about those kinds of topics. And then you'll have the writers on the outskirts, some of them will really want to try to be part of it because they think that's going to help them get a book deal or get some relevancy. But in actuality, I'm just of the argument now that just you use it for what it's worth, but be mindful more of your mental health, because it's not all it's cracked up to be. It really isn't. Yes, we wouldn't be here having this conversation if it wasn't for social media, but at the same rate, it's not our lifeblood. It can't be our lifeblood because it's not a sustainable thing. It's only a matter of time before some other platform comes in. Twitter's been around forever, but we even saw that Elon Musk thing happen recently where people had a mass exodus. Social media is ephemeral. It feels like it's always going to be there and it's super important, but in reality it's noise, and noise will eventually give way to silence. And so I don't know where I'm going with this specifically, but I'm just saying more for writers in general, use it for some sort of inherent good. But the days of being I have to be on social media and super active is a very negative / like maybe not it's a counterintuitive, that's the word, counterintuitive approach to like, say, like thinking career minded for your career. Use it if you want to, maybe still have it on account, right? Like, and like talk about your books, or talk about maybe there is an argument that you want to talk about in a constructive manner. But the idea of being a brand and being all this other stuff, like, unless you really want to be a social media influencer, I don't think that's the way to go these days. Because it just takes away from so many other things. I've seen so many writers that are amazing writers, but they spend so much time cultivating their social media brand, and it has negative effects on them too. Like, people like unfollow them and like I don't want nothing to do with this person because they are so excruciating online. That sucks, right? Like, it's not supposed to be. I don't think anyone wants to go online and be like, I'm going to put out a book, and then I'm going to be so horrible online that no one buys my book. I don't think anyone actively goes online to do that. But by virtue of people trying to be so relevant on social media and to chase that concept of a public-facing persona and a brand, sometimes it comes out that way. Some of the kindest people, like actual real, like really kind, awesome people, I'm sure are just, they come off horrible on social media. There's that too. Like, there's this like disconnect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, another problem with social media, and in terms of people coming away with other people with a negative impression, is, I mean, it's the opposite to the long form conversation as we're having now. I mean, in Twitter in particular, there's 144 characters, or I don't know, maybe they
280 now.
Yeah, maybe they expanded it. Okay, well, definitely then I'll believe you on that one. But it just means that people are constantly being quoted and out of context, and then so people are pushing up against someone for saying whatever it is, and that is then interpreted or misinterpreted, and then that person, according to others, that they're gone, they're cancelled, to use the modern parlance, which I don't really like. Right. But it's easier to just say that rather than come up with some circuitous way to phrase it. But I just think it's dangerous when people are being taken out of context and out of context, because context is important, and something said might be bad, but without seeing the full picture and without knowing all of the facts, I mean, it's very dangerous to just be like, right, that person said this, they're fucking done. Yeah. It's like, well, what else did they say? What's the full conversation? What was their mental state like? How much had they consumed? How intoxicated were they? And these things don't necessarily absolve them, but it's ridiculous to say that every negative act is equal. Now we're coming back to the binary, and we're almost coming back to the Bible, where all sins are equal, which was something I never really vibed with when I was younger, because I grew up in a religious household, not so much anymore, but I could not wrap my head around the fact that it's like, well, hang on, if I covet my neighbor's ox, and they might have a really nice ox, or I murder someone, that is equal, doesn't fucking compute.
Yeah, I mean, social media operates on a very thin line of like the most binary of binaries. I mean, I tend to lean towards what you're saying. Like, we're in that. I wish it would be that if something happens on social media where there's an outrage, it isn't just bandwagoning where people like choose a side. And the fact that you have to even say there's a side is already a problem, because that's already in putting the binary, like this side or that side, blank versus blank. To have a real conversation, a constructive one at that, involves more than just that delineation. I mean, when like way back, like the whole art, like the philosophical art, like when philosophers argued, they would argue in these long tangents and these sweeping conversations that often took hours, and like would they be resolved with like a nice bow at the end? No, but they would constantly get deeper and deeper. And could we even do that with social media? No, of course not. It's not built to be that way. But like a lot of what happens on social media, I think could benefit from more of those deeper conversations, but by virtue of the platform that as it's designed, it's never going to lend itself to that. And that's the inherent fallacy of like specifically Twitter. I mean, Facebook is like some dead ass platform anyway. Instagram is like food pics and fun stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. TikTok is a beast that proves that I'm getting old and I will never join it. So I don't know what's going on there. But like with Twitter specifically, like it's not going to be, it unfortunately has become the place where all these like really deep conversations or these topics that should be having deep conversations end up happening, but they're happening on such a fucking shoddy platform. Like it can't sustain the real conversation. So we end up with bandwagoning, that like witch hunt kind of like cancellation of people, all these like negativity, and then it happens, it balloons, and like people get affected, their lives are ruined, and then it just disappears 15 minutes later, and someone else, like, they literally shift to the next, they meaning just the proverbial they, like there's the next outrage and the one after that. We're talking right now, I guarantee you somewhere in some community on Twitter, someone is being canceled and dragged like motherfucking crazy via the same problem. It sucks. It really does suck because for everyone that, like one person that probably deserved all that hate, there's so many others that get suicidal, maybe kill themselves because they were at the receiving end of that and they were just misunderstood. It was a far more nuanced kind of, situation that involved that deserved a deeper conversation. But Twitter's 280 characters and no one gives a shit. They just want their hot takes and they want, whatever capitalistic, draw that they get out of being quote unquote relevant. They're only invested in so much as their own fucking, their own gains. I don't think there's very many people on Twitter right now that are doing it for like a conscious, like, oh, I care about all you guys. No, maybe actually, no, I don't want to say that because that's too limiting, but there are definitely people that are probably doing that. But like generally it's the Twitter as a spectrum. So many people are on there just to like have their cake and eat it too.
And a companion piece, kind of your novella, Runaways, A Writer's Dilemma, might be something that people want to check out.
Oh, yeah. That was, how briefly can I explain it? So that book and this other book, Dreams of Being, they were sort of like the companion books in ways where I definitely went through a creative crisis where just trying to figure out, why I write and my association with social media, my association with all of it. And it resulted in, well, firstly, Dreams of Being, where I, if you guys remember Lazy Fascist Press,
I do,
back in the day. Yeah, Cameron Pierce, great guy. He was a great friend, a great editor. He gave me a 5-book contract deal back in the day, and I published through Lazy Fascist. And I remember he had a Facebook post once where he had like a group of, like a bunch of funny parody prompts, and one of them was Jiro dreams of sushi, where Jiro does nothing but dream of sushi, having failed to become a sushi chef.
Right.
And I joked with him saying, "Yo, I'm gonna write that book," and he like kind of like was like, "Haha, yeah," and I'm like, "You're gonna publish it." By the time I finished writing it, he was out of publishing. He's enjoying his life in Astoria. I think he's like a manager at a brewery now. Like, he's living his own like next like level life. Like, he's doing awesome. But like, he was no longer in publishing. So I had this book there, and then like shortly thereafter, Runaways, Kevin Samsel at Future Tense, kind of like we wanted to work together on something. And I think I remember like talking about this book, like this idea for a book, which was pretty much the hard and fast like reflection that I had with social media, and the whole gamut of a writer thinking that you need to be relevant, you need to be part of this, part of that, and do all this for all these people, and like be this certain person and this certain brand, and just generally the despair of being a writer. That book kind of became the crystallization of that. And then together, those two, I guess I look at them in terms of like all the stuff I've written as sort of like, all right, this is Michael having his like midlife crisis writing style, or something like that, like midlife crisis in terms of like as a writer. But yeah, it was a purge in ways. It was, and I feel like, at least with Runaways, people that have read it, there's a lot to be gleaned from it in terms of, maybe if you pick it up and you give it a shot, you might just see elements of your own social media experience in there, or just experience as being a writer in this modern day where we have this constant noise, this constant like thing in the back of our minds, aka social media, and all this like this feeling that you're not enough, and you're in the sense of imposter syndrome, and this idea that if you're not like some brandable entity online and like this character, you're not going to be a hot shot writer or something, like all that stuff is in that. But for me, it's like just kind of like form the full explanation of both books. Actually, like for me, it was very much those books were written because I needed to figure it out for myself. And like, although I could say that I have, it's a constant battle. It's not like it's like, oh, check, done, I got it all figured out. No, I mean, I'm constantly fucking battling this shit. There are good days, bad days, and horrible days.
Yeah.
As you guys know, being writers and to be a writer anyway is fucking brutal. Like, why the hell would you want to be? Why do we choose to be writers? Goddamn.
Yeah. Well, I think of many people, we've concluded if you have the choice, then choose not to be. You are a writer because there is no choice in the matter.
Yeah, you kind of just fall into it. And I mean, I definitely did. I would have never expected this to happen. Like, I wanted to be a musician, and then after that I wanted to be a game developer, and then after that I ended up like doing sociology for a hot second, and then kind of fell into writing. Yeah.
But talking about the good days, the bad days, and the horrible days, I mean, my understanding is you had quite a horrible experience during the Runaways time with your former literary agent.
Yeah. No, that was bad all around. Like, the short version is, I in 2017, I did this month-long social media driven road trip that was supposed to be sort of the nucleus of a nonfiction book that examines connectivity and connection in our modern day. And I was able to do the road trip. It almost killed me, like, in many ways. But basically the gist was I could only go where social media told me to go, but I had to go cross country. So I started obviously in Brooklyn, where I've been living since, around like 2016, 15, 16, somewhere around there, to the other side of the country, Portland, Oregon. And I chose it mainly because budget car rental was cheapest to drop it off there. I was like, really, like that's the only reason why I chose it. And I was able to do it, and it was like really cool to meet a lot of people along the way. But it was sort of a breaking point with not only why I was writing, but what I wanted out of this, and social media, actually. And basically what I realized, well, first of all, the agent that I had thought he could sell it, and then he couldn't sell it. Well, I don't even know if he did try to sell it. That's the thing. There's a whole fucking crazy scenario with that guy. But that's, you know what? I don't even want to even dwell with that negativity because it's not even worth it at this point. But what the real takeaway of this whole experience was, like, first of all, I wrote those 2 books after it to try to make sense of it. But I realized that in order to sustain whatever it is whatever kind of creative career you have to know what the fuck you actually want out of this. Some people may say they want the big bucks, then I argue, like, why are you writing a book? Do something else, because you'll make more money that way. I guarantee you. You put the time, the work, the effort, and you have even a modicum of talent, and that's also talent is a very elusive term that, like, very few of us can really truly define. It's all kind of who knows, but yeah, you'll end up like making more money just by virtue of that industry drawing like more revenue. But uh, what I realized is like what I really wanted to, what I realized I needed to do is to do a whole kind of like full reflection of why the fuck I'm doing this.
Mm.
And I'd put out a number of books. I put out 5 books with Lazy Fascist. I put out this modern retelling of Albert Camus' The Stranger. It's called The Strangest, with Or Books, which is a politically like a left-leaning political-ish press based in Manhattan. They published like Julian Assange and Yoko Ono and all this other stuff. It was really cool that I got with them, but like they didn't know how to sell the book and kind of like flopped. But anyway, I needed to figure out why I was here. Like, why am I continuing to do this? And throughout, like, my searching and writing Dreams of Being, and then before writing Runaways is more the social media, like kind of focusing on that. I realized that like, it's not for like the book deal. It's not for, I fucking love that people are reading my stuff, and specifically with Anybody Home, it's been amazing. It's like literally giving me life to hear that people are enjoying this book. But at the end of the day, if there's only one, if there has to be one thing that keeps us doing this, and for me specifically, it's truly because I love getting lost in the project and being able to live in that world, that thing that I'm creating, like to feel that rush when like that scene starts working. That's what I want. I'm chasing that all the time. I want nothing more than to always work on ideas and stories. That's my proverbial like necklace that I wear, that I hold on to when I'm in doubt. Like that's the thing that keeps me doing this. I don't care. I don't even say I don't care, but like if anything else, I can't control anything else. Like I have no right to be able to control anything else. All I can control is the fact that I know and love and want to continue writing. And then, with social media, it was just, social media was never the same after that road trip. I went from documenting everything about my life and really thinking that that's what you're supposed to do, to like just having panic attacks and looking at social media as this horrible thing, and then realizing that it's not a horrible thing. It's just my association with it. And, nowadays I'm just doing what feels right for me with social media, which is just like doing minimal, honestly. Like I used to always think that I had to tweet like potential viral tweets every day, and tweet and like retweet and tweet about other people, and like, amplify them and like be a lit citizen. I mean, I want to be good to other writers, and I'm good to my friends and all that stuff, but that's a horrible like feeling, to feel like you have to be so responsible all the time and like always have to be like amplifying everybody else. It's tiring, man. We're all just people here. So I kind of like washed out with social media. And so like what you see on social media these days for me is really just like, I'm retweeting all the cool things that people are saying about like, Anybody Home or whatever. Occasionally I'll probably tweet about like a film or a game or something like that. And I'll tweet about articles that I had to write for clients and stuff like that. And that's all I have like mentally left for it. And I have to believe that it's okay, that's okay, because man, if that's not okay, then why the fuck is social media a thing? Right? Like, why are we doing any of it? Like to think that in order to be a part of something, you have to like give half your soul to it, like all the time. That sucks, man. Like it almost ruined me already. Like, and I don't want it to ruin me again. So like, I will definitely like retweet and amplify my friends and like the people I respect and stuff like that. But I can't chase that fucking thing anymore. I can't think that way.
Yeah.
And I argue that anyone that feels that they have to, take that reflection, sit down one day and like truly reflect on what you want out of this thing and what your association with social media is, and all of it. Because the sooner you have that conversation with yourself and like at least start to have it and like start to make sense with it, because I feel like most of us don't. We just get caught up in it. In the act of writing, act of trying to get published, all this other stuff. The sooner you start to find that proverbial necklace and whatever it is that like you hold on to and know that that's truly what you want out of this, the sooner you can like find some footing, some ground from which you can make sense of all this. Like I learned the hard way, man, and I'm still learning constantly, clearly, because Anybody Home was this it's drawer novel, this like thing that I didn't think anyone wanted to read, and now it's showing the opposite. So like, what the fuck?
Yeah. And if people are lifting people up for the algorithm, then really they're not lifting them up at all. It's artificial and it's fake. So, just with the same as with the writing, do what is true to you, but don't fucking do something because you feel you have to. Just do whatever the fuck is right, what comes naturally to you.
Authenticity. You said it earlier with the likable, unlikable, I think it was topic they were talking about. Authenticity is a very important thing. Like I feel like we're losing a lot of that today.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about like someone being themselves. Like honestly, like think about it this way, like in the era of everyone always trying to be a persona and all that, try to be yourself for once. Maybe that might work out for you. Who knows? Stop being a persona online. Be yourself. Who knows? I just like kind of think about that sometimes. Like how many people that go online are actually even remotely their true selves? They're mostly posturing a certain hot take, a certain brand, even where they realize it or not. And like half the time, maybe it's because they feel like they have to be guarded because it's fucking scary out there. Or they think that they have to be entertaining or something. And then you have to ask yourself, are you trying to be I don't know why I'm bringing them up, but like this is YouTube, not Twitter, but like a Markiplier, like social media influencer kind of person where you literally make shit tons of money just influencing people? No, most of us writers are not going to be that. And even if we are, we probably have already like done things outside of it. Right. And then we went on social media, and because by virtue of having a fuck ton of movie adaptations or like a lot of really huge best-selling books, I'm thinking of like the bigger names, you just have a big following anyway, and then it just adds. But most of us don't really. I feel like most writers aren't actually aspiring to be social media influencers. So maybe think about that,
Yeah. And I would add, you don't have to voice your opinion on everything. Even though some people will say, oh, it's very telling that person hasn't commented on this political event. And it's like, well, maybe because they're a writer. Maybe because they're an artist. They're not a political correspondent where people are waiting for their take. It's okay to just shut the fuck up and not say anything, right?
I mean, we all have our opinions and all that. Yeah, I mean, I agree in the sense that no one should feel like they are forced to give their opinion on a public platform, Like, what happened to the freedom of speech, right?
Yeah.
Like, Jesus Christ. Like, to feel like you need to say anything about anything is kind of a fucked up scenario. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a scenario where like I know someone, like I haven't been in that scenario where like someone was like waiting for me to say something. Like I don't remember anyway. But that scares the fuck out of me to think that people will be like, we need you to say something about this. And it's just like, wow, like what kind of fucked up mentality is that already?
Yeah. And normally with these things, I find that like, I mean, with most people, like your perspective should be pretty clear. Like it probably doesn't need to be explicitly stated as a good person what your opinion might be on that topic, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I tend to block people like that. If they like, and start like, even if they're talking about someone else, if they say, well, I was hoping that somebody else would have weighed in or something like that about some political hot topic, that's a fucking block.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to see it because it's like it's almost like, in a sense, and it sounds dramatic, but how dare you even question anybody? At that point right there, it's nothing but virtue signaling.
There you go. I mean, that's true. Yeah. Like, what was mentioned earlier about how like how many of us actually know what anyone is actually going through when they're like tweeting or in that, in that frame of mind. Like,
Right.
There's so much else going on. no one ever thinks that way when they're like, all right, now I'm going to fucking like tweet at this person and be like, you piece of shit, blah, blah, blah. It's like, Jesus, like, and just generally, and like generally speaking, like why the fuck do you want to put that negative energy out in this world?
Right.
Like there's already enough of it. I'm tired. I feel like most of us are tired. Most of us are like dealing with like a lot of shit. We all have our problems and things that we're dealing with, and like but then again, you know, the same mindset. A lot of people have that mindset too, but they go online on Twitter as a release and they want to release it. Like there's very much that too. I think there's something to be said about that. Like people do want to just shit out some hate and feel better and then walk away, you know? Like there's, I 100% guarantee, like there has to be like that, like grade A mindset of that magnitude where like they want to see something bad and they want to feel like they're like a part of something that's fighting the bad thing. And then they like feel vilified and also have their hot take out there and they can walk away from it because it's as simple as that anyway. You just hit refresh and here's a new sequence of whatever the fuck's happening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and as we spoke about your bad experience with your previous literary agent, I did want to kind of turn it forward to something more positive because you're now working with Lane Haymont of Tobias Literary Agency. So how did that come about and how is the experience thus far?
He's been great. Like, I finally feel like I've found an agent that gets me, you know, and like he just, I can trust that he's like doing whatever moves he thinks that needs to be done in terms of like working on that end, the business side of things. What happened was, I want to say like around the Library Journal review, like when I got that started review, I got on a call with him, a Zoom thing with him, and where he talked about where there was like a brief stint of they're like, well, there's still film stuff happening for this book, but like whatever was happening at that particular point in time needed some agenting, right, as well. So he came in and we talked about it. And then he also asked about what I was working on. So I sent him a couple manuscripts. Next day, it was really quick too. It was like next day we got on another Zoom and he was like, yeah, so here's like, this is like the agency terms, blah, blah, blah. Let's work together if you're down, you know, whatever. And I was like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And then, you know, he's on top of things. Like there's a reason why like people seem to everyone says good things about Lane because Lane knows his stuff. Like I feel like when you're an agent in this industry, your bread and butter is like being, you know, knowing how to pitch books and knowing how to find the editor that might like that book and just generally being like the opposite of a writer, basically like being sociable and you know, endearing and just being like a person, right? Like being that forward facing thing. Like we are generally all kind of like having our own neuroses with social stuff. Like we're all like, it takes a lot out of us to be social. I mean, I'm generalizing the fuck out of that, but like writers tend to have to really try hard to be that forward facing kind of thing. But like, I feel like with Lane, for instance, like now he forges business friendships and like as agents do, right? Like, no, it's been great. It's been great so far. I feel like I'm in a happy place with that too. And yeah.
Well, I did want to say that in terms of Anybody Home, if ever there was a companion piece of yours to it, I think it might be My Pet Serial Killer, as this explores the desire and motivations of serial killers. And again, it has that very seductive voice from a pretty abhorrent protagonist. And pretty abhorrent is just me being very British about it. Obviously, horrendous person.
I feel like that's a deep cut right there because like I have a special, that book has a special place for me in my like mind or heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's the only other horror novel I've written like that's published right now. Like I've been writing other stuff too that I guess could like fall under horror, but like that one definitely is whatever. Claire, the main character, definitely like, you know, has her own little place in my proverbial heart as well. Yeah, I guess it could be. You're right. It could be a companion piece. Uh, she she's also very voice driven, first person, but done in a way where it's less about what I was trying to do with anybody home and more just that she just felt like she had to be a domineering kind of voice, like very confident, but also under the illusion that maybe it's all more so the confidence that she hides behind a veneer of maybe being a withdrawn person in a crowd, like she's not some like femme fatale character that's gonna like strut around unless maybe she needs to, but in reality she has that inner like drive. Yeah, My Pet Serial Killer that was a fun one. I in hindsight I'm like trying to think like, did it find its audience? I don't know if it did, but I'm late to horror. I will say, like, I realized that like maybe I was always writing transgressive / horror leaning stuff, but no one put me in that container, I guess, until recently. And I don't care. I don't care what container anyone puts me in. I'm just gonna write stuff that I want to write, And I mean, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna definitely probably fall into a transgressive mode, the way you were saying, because that's generally what I find fascinating, at least enough to write books about.
Yeah. Well, what is it that you're working on at the moment?
All I can say is that I'm writing something that's spiritually a successor to Anybody Home, but focusing on true crime.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily in the vein of Anybody Home, like in terms of in terms of all kinds of things, but it's definitely doing something with true crime where it points the lens at the actual phenomenon that is true crime, specifically like podcasts and stuff like that. With a lot of influence from the Cecil Hotel Alyssa Lamb story. You guys are familiar with that one?
I don't actually know that one.
Really? Bob, do you know that one?
Is that the correct me if I'm wrong, because there's so many stories, but is that the one where the lady supposedly like disappeared and then they found her like in like a water tank or something?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So Cecil Hotel is this like kind of notorious flop house hotel in LA that has numerous stories and tragedies attached to it, including like during the height of Richard Ramirez, Night Stalker. He during the height of his menace, he had a room there at the Cecil Hotel. He would like infamously, do his evil deeds or whatever, and like walk back to the Cecil Hotel into the back alley, all bloodied and shit, and like take his clothes off and just walk up the back steps into his like 3rd or 4th, whatever floor he was on, all still bloodied, and like right after a kill. And it's one of those like kind of cursed places, the Cecil Hotel. But yeah, the short version of this is like Elisa Lam. I think she's from Canada. I can't quite remember, but she flies she visits LA, like many tourists do, like all star-studded, like for the reason. And yeah, like she stays at Cecil because she's on a budget. It was like rebranded by then as Stay on Main because they wanted to somehow just have people forget that it's the Cecil Hotel. And I don't know what the time span is, or how long it takes from like when she checks in to like disappears, but basically she disappears and no one knows what happens. And then they find the elevator footage of her during like some odd hour of the night, seemingly being stalked or chased after someone. She like jumps in the elevator, stands there, like kind of looks around the corner as if she's being like hunted, and then hides again, and then eventually walks out of the elevator, and the elevator closes. And then that kind of caused an uproar throughout all the armchair investigator true crime circles online. People like, what the fuck happened? Yeah, for a long time, everyone had theories, but no one knew what the real whereabouts or what happened to her. until people started complaining. Guests at the Stay on Main / Cecil Hotel started complaining about low water pressure, and like the water tasted weird and it was like brownish. And they checked the water tower, and sure enough, there's this semi-decomposed corpse, and it turns out to be her. Short, like to fast forward to like what they realized what happened is, so she had a history of I think like some kind of mental disorder, and she also was really bad about taking her medication, and she wasn't taking her medication while she was there, and she might have had a psychotic break and like climbed up there and like maybe imagined that she was being chased or something like that, and somehow managed to climb up that water tower, which is like a fucking feat anyway for even anyone who's cognizant of their actions, and jumped in or something like that. And apparently like she took off her clothes while in there, probably just trying to like remove the weight, because if you wear clothes in water, as you know, it's you take on extra weight. So she was trying to struggle to get back out. She had like a moment of lucidity or something. But yeah, it's one of those true crime stories that kind of got a huge devoted response. And the thing I'm working on now is like loosely inspired based off that, and specifically in the essence of how people commodified the story for their own gain.
Man, what an awful tragedy.
It's wild. It's one of the most wild. Yeah, it's so unfortunate and sad. And yeah, it's one of the few ones where the ending is sad, right? Like most of the time, it's like, okay, they went missing, they got found, or it was not to say being killed by someone is not sad. I'm just saying like that's almost like it's like that's what people expect. But in the case of Alyssa Lamb, it wasn't any of that. It kind of pushed back at people of saying no, she simply, not even simply, she had mental psychotic break. It was all her own doing, and it was one of the rare instances where the solution was actually not the logical one. The logical one is that she was chased by someone or like hunted and killed, right? Like that's what people probably wanted. No, it was the sad one. It was the one that was illogical, which is that she was having a psychotic break and somehow managed to get herself in the water tower thing.
Yeah, and I think as you were telling us about this, I think that there is a Netflix documentary or a documentary on Netflix, because it was sounding vaguely familiar to me.
I mean, there's been a lot. There's like endless amounts of YouTube videos that are documenting it. There's that limited series, like maybe like 6 episodes or something like that on Netflix. It's been commodified for sure. People have made a lot of money off the tragedy of Alyssa Lamb.
Well, we can't end on that note, even though it would be really apropos given how bleak Anybody Home is. It would almost be funny to end a nearly 3-hour podcast on such a morbid note. But I'm going to attempt to take it back. And
take it back.
I mean, something I noticed with Anybody Home is just how many blurbs you had for this book. You've got so many blurbs, and from some of the best writers in the business. So I wanted to talk about this as kind of an important marketing strategy. And, did you have a minimum blurb count that you were kind of looking to get for this one?
Well, it's like anyone else, you have like a list of holy grail blurbs, right? Like authors that you really respect and you really want to get blurbs from. What happened with this one is I reached out to I want to say like 8 people on that list, and it was a trickle at first. Like B.R. Yeager was the first to say yes, and like he read it pretty quickly and offered his awesome blurb. But then it was like a trickle. Like I didn't hear from a lot of people for a bit, and then all of a sudden I started to hear them. All of a sudden those 8, usually of the 8 you get like 2 if you're lucky. But I got 8, and and then it just kept going. Like some people read it. I met Todd Kiesling finally in person at Scarce That Care AuthorCon.
Yeah,
he's a great guy, great author, all around just like awesome. And, you know, we had galleys there, and I remember giving him like the last copy. I think it was the last copy. And like, and he was like, oh yeah, he was like, he was so awesome about it. And like, just, he offered me the blurb. I didn't even ask for it. So to answer your question about marketing strategy, I don't think it was any more a marketing strategy than blurb hunting is, right? Like the volume of blurbs was accidental because it was yet again going back to that lesson. Like I aimed for 3 because I feel like that's a good amount, but my list was 8, and then all of them said yes, and all of them gave blurbs. And then some people read it as well. Like Brian Asman read it. He got like a blurb. He got a galley at LA Book Fest or something like that from Christoph, and just offered a blurb afterwards. And it was just fucking awesome, man. It was just like every step of the way, just these people, these amazing writers, just like picking up the book and being like, Ronald Malfi did that. Like I remember yesterday we were driving into New York City from Troy. You know, I'm slightly hungover from the night of drinking with Lisa and all that stuff. And Christoph's driving, he looks down at his phone and he's like, oh, hey, cool. And he like points it at me and I'm like, oh shit. Yeah. Like, cause he's friendly with, or they're friends, cause they're both musicians too. Christoph and Ronald. I guess he had gotten a galley and he was reading it and he was like, oh, sorry, I'm late on this, but here's a blurb for the book. And that's been kind of the thing with this one. Like, that's been shocking for me. It wasn't a marketing strategy in the sense that I wanted that volume. It just became that volume. So it kind of like, I guess, struck a chord in ways. And I'm sitting here talking to you guys, staring at a screen and just being like, you know, I'm just, like I said many, many times before, I'm just happy. I'm just happy as hell to be here. Like, it's just cool to see a book that could have easily never become anything, be like so embraced by a lot of writers that I admire, and many of them just did it because they liked the book. It seems they offered a blurb.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be working out very well, and a lot of people are talking about it. And I mean, normally if I put out a book, I'll again aim for 3, but no, I like what you've done. Maybe I'll aim for 8 next time. Maybe that's the new number. Just fucking keep going.
I mean, I 100% recommend generating like a list of like a mixture of like, yeah, there's no way that's happening, to like,
yeah,
friendly, you know, like, and I respect this person. I would love to see what they think. And yeah, just hit them up, because like you're gonna get a lot of silence. Like I at first I did, right? You know, like I didn't hear back from a lot of people until I started to, and it was just like it was great. Like it never happened to me before, for sure. Yeah, don't hit up 3. If you are aiming for 3, hit up like 6 or 8, because most of them won't respond. Because on my end, like I suck at giving blurbs, and just because I always forget to like to like read it in time. So I understand why a lot of people would just be silent, you know, like, because it's hard to sometimes give blurbs, because it's literally it's free labor from that writer, and you know they still have to read usually something off of a screen, which for me at least is harder. I like having the book and the pages. I don't know, my eyes suck anyway, so it's sort of like any less time on the screen's better, is for the better. But I realized that too. So like, there's a lot of odds against you when you're blurb hunting. That has nothing to do with whether or not they even want to read your thing. It's just like it's a fucking hard thing to do. Mm. So definitely aim for like 8 to 12 or something, and go for it.
Yeah. Well, what should you be kinder to yourself about?
Kinder? Probably doing less. Probably like sleeping more. I should probably do that. I should probably, do less, meaning like, I always feel like I have like a fuck ton of deadlines for work, or, you know, for self-imposed deadlines. I think one thing I should probably work on as I'm getting older, you know, I'm not yet 40, but I'm getting there. and I can already feel some of the age, like you can't just be like, I'm going to stay up until 3:30 a.m. every fucking day doing all a million things. I can't fucking do that shit anymore. Is to prioritize time, and what I want to do with that time. Yeah, I need to work on that. That's definitely something.
Yeah. I hear you there, and yeah, it's frustrating when you have these little reminders of your mortality, and it's like, oh fuck, that all-nighter I could once do, I just can't, just for seemingly no reason other than the passage of time, or like we've got like a finite amount of all-nighters, and it's like, yeah, you've used all your lives.
Remember when you were like maybe a teenager or even younger, where like it was like such a awesome privilege, or like, and or so much fun to be like, yeah, we're staying up all night tonight.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, fuck that. You know how much that will hurt?
Yeah.
It's like, you want to stay up all night? Well, you fucking die. I'm gonna go to sleep. That's what aging is.
Yeah.
Oh god.
Yeah.
Like I'm still gonna go play that PlayStation after we're done with this. Like I'm gonna unwind by playing that PlayStation. But I remember, I bring that up just because like when I was like preteen, like when we were taught to circle back to the very beginning of the conversation, playing Silent Hill the day of, I stayed up all night playing that motherfucker. Like I easily did. I was young, right, and hyped, and it was fun and exciting to be like, to watch, to sit there in a room, and like, so eventually the sun starts coming up and you're like, I did that.
Yeah.
I was able to play this all night. Now it's like, I am going to hate myself tomorrow is what's going to happen, because I didn't get any fucking sleep, and my bones will hurt, and I'll be delirious, and tomorrow's a wash. That's like what happens when you're in your 30s or older, when you try to stay up all night.
Yeah, but I think sometimes, you need to unwind playing the PlayStation or whatever, because if you just go to bed when you're hyped up or your brain is kind of alive, you just can't sleep anyway. So I don't know, we need these rituals to almost prime us to get into sleep mode.
This is true. Like, there's nothing worse than being in bed and your mind racing. And then, like, one thing for me at least is like, if I look at the clock, whether it be like the phone, like the clock on the phone, or like nearby or whatever, if I start monitoring the time that's elapsing where I'm still awake, I'll end up wasting most of the night in a sense of low key anxiety, where my mind just races around topics as the hours trickle by, and I'm monitoring it. It's a fucking vicious circle. Like, oh god. So like what I've been doing that works for me is like, I'll just like watch like YouTube videos, honestly, until I start to like zone out and start to nod a little bit. And the moment that happens, I'm like, all right, cool, put phone down, go to sleep.
Yeah.
And like, very specifically, I watch speed runs of video games, like retro hunting video game things, like video game stuff. Like, it's definitely tapping into a certain, like, that's like my sanctuary kind of thing. Like, I just love to like tap into the nostalgia, whatever. And like, that turns my brain off, watching people like essentially speed run a game, or like hunt for like rare video games. I don't even have to think. It's just them talking about shit and finding things, finding like in the wild and talking about how rare it is. I'm like, yeah, it must be nice, awesome, cool, simple life, and then fall asleep.
Yeah. Do you have a specific video game that you think you're gonna play tonight?
You know what? I don't know. Might start out with some Tekken 3 just because for nostalgia purposes, and then might move to like some of the weirder ones that like are Japanese only. Like, there's this game. There's a sequel to a fighting game. Again, I'm a big fighting game fan too. Tobal #1 came out in the U.S. from SquareSoft, which Final Fantasy guys. But they never put out the sequel, Tobal 2, in the U.S. But it came out in Japan. There's a English patch for it that's been around for a while. I have it on the thing now. I just haven't really had time to play it, to really dive in and play it. I might do some of that, and I might fuck around with like these random games that are on there, because there's like 800 games on there, man. Like, I'll scroll through and do the paralysis thing for a little bit too, like what happens on Netflix, where you just
yeah.
scroll through and you're like, I might play that, and then you don't, and you're just like keep going and you keep scrolling. I might play that too, and then you just keep scrolling. There's going to be that for a while too. Like I'm going to have to go through that list a number of times, be like, all right, what do I actually want to play here, man? Because I don't even know. That's the only thing that I think is that's like a deficiency to. So like every single retro console now has either a cartridge that functions like an optical disc emulator, like N64 and all of them. They have these EverDrives where you just have the SD card that you plug into it. Every single one of these retro consoles have this capability now where you essentially have a set-top box. It's everything on an SD card right there. You don't have to have any discs. You don't have to have any cartridges. But the problem is it has the same thing that happens with streaming, where you end up scrolling through, wanting to play or do whatever with all these different things, and you end up doing none of it. You end up just like playing the same 2 games, or whatever, because like it's just hard to choose when you have so many options. So like long-winded way of saying I will probably play those 2 games, but who the fuck knows, because I'm going to scroll through for a while.
All right. Well, start the conversation with video games, end it with it. Why not? Let's make this
why not? Yeah.
circular as if it was the plan all along.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
I mean, where can our listeners connect with you?
I'm on Twitter. Just look up my name. You'll find me. And I'm on Instagram. Same deal. You'll find me. Those are probably the 2 ways to find me. I'm not on Facebook anymore, really, so don't bother with that. But other than that, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty reachable. I'm on those 2 platforms. Like we talked all about social media, and where like I'm kind of stepping back a lot, but I do like being able to like talk about stuff and link up with other writers and readers and all that. So yeah, hit me up.
All right. Do you have any final thoughts to leave our listeners with?
I mean, I have all kinds of thoughts, obviously, as clearly as this conversation has drawn. But no, man, this is a great conversation. And if you want to actually do the Heat 2 episode, I double dare you both to read it. But that means I have to also read it, and we have to somehow make an hour out of a conversation about it. I'll leave you with that. An open.
Yeah.
An open prompt or an open dare.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, you said, we'll have to find an hour to talk about it. You can't be aware of our kind of sister podcast, Story Unboxed, the horror podcast on the craft of writing, where we analyze films and short stories, and it is not uncommon for us to talk for 2 or 3 hours. So.
Mm-hmm.
I might have to do it there.
I think we could have a conversation about Heat 2 for several hours. Should we choose to do this? Frankly, fucking insane idea.
Yeah, go. We have to now immediately. What we do next after this podcast, all 3 of us, is we go hit up the publisher for a review copy.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll be like, look, we need a copy of Heat 2. We have got a very fucking special podcast planned for this. So you give us the review copy, and well, let's hope we like it, because if not, it's like they gave us a copy and we fucking hate it. But that's the name of the game, you know?
Mm-hmm.
When you give someone a review copy, there is no guarantee for a good review. So
that's right.
Remember that, people.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you so much for listening to Michael J. Seidlinger on This Is Horror. Join us again next time when we will be chatting with Ronald Kelly. But if you would like to get that ahead of the crowd, if you would like to get every episode ahead of the crowd, then become our patron at patreon.com/thisishorror. Not only do you get early bird access to each and every episode, but you get to submit questions to the interviewee. You get to listen to exclusive podcasts such as Story Unboxed, a horror podcast on the craft of writing, and the patrons only Q&A sessions with myself and Bob Pastorella. And as regular listeners know, I am going through some things at the moment. I am not having a good time, and every little bit counts, really. It is almost a UK supermarket slogan I unwittingly used. But yes, the more people who support This Is Horror, the more chance I have of being saved from this awful situation that I find myself in. And so I wanted to thank the new patrons and the people who have supported me by buying my books. We've had some orders even directly through This Is Horror for their watching by myself and Bob Pastorella. So we really appreciate that. And indeed, thank you to those who have reached out to me about editing or writing consultations. Little by little, slowly but surely, you are giving me hope. Sometimes in life, it's hope, it's that little light, that's all we need. So I really do appreciate you. And so a thank you to the latest patrons, to Cynthia Paleo, who, oh my goodness, is such a fantastic writer. And actually we'll be getting her back on the show very soon. She's got a wonderful poetry collection coming out next month, I believe, so definitely one to keep an eye out for. And also thank you to James DeMoss and Alana Gamel. And thank you too to Shelley Arlen, who has recently upgraded her pledge. So tremendous gratitude and thanks for all your support. And if you too would like to support us, then head over to patreon.com/thisishorror. Have a little look at what we offer and see if it is a good fit for you, because I would love you to join us. For those of you that are patrons, but you have not yet joined the Writers Forum on Discord, or maybe you've joined but you haven't said anything, don't be a stranger. Do leave a message. Do get involved with this little writing community that we have. So I think it's something special, and it's a way that you can interact with me and Bob. It's a way that you can discuss craft, and I'm just really enjoying seeing all of you there. So do check it out. Okay, before I wrap up, a little bit of an advert break.
Tinnitus Press presents Lure, a novella of otherworldly folk horror by Tim McGregor. In a fishing village on an alien shore hang the bones of ancient forsaken gods. The arrival of a new god brings descent and madness and threatens to tear the starving community apart. Against a backdrop of brine and blood, Lure blurs the line between natural disaster and self-destruction. Eric LaRocca calls Lure a monstrously inventive fable, immersive and utterly compelling. Pre-order at tinnituspress.com now. Lure is out July 18th. Horror on Main, a new weekend convention for the horror community. Exploring all the shadows of horror, our guests include writers and actors, but also artists, publishers, directors, composers, and more. We've been going to cons for over 20 years and are changing up the little things to make the big picture amazing. Beyond guests, contests, movies, panels, and podcasters, our layout and programming are designed to further incorporate the very idea of community. Join us Memorial Day weekend 2023 in Hunt Valley, Maryland. Come to the block party and meet your new neighbors. HorrorOnMain.com.
Now, as I said at the top of the show, if you'd like to advertise on This Is Horror podcast, do drop me a line, michael@thisishorror.co.uk. At the end of September, the advertising rates are going up, so this is a fantastic time to lock in those rates at the existing rate. Some of you may be thinking, hold up a minute, Michael. Didn't you say via email on Twitter that the advertising was going up on September the 4th? To you, I would say yes, you are correct. I did say that, but then I realized I hadn't announced it on the podcast. And of course, this is where a number of advertisers are going to be listening. So I have extended the rates increasing until the end of September. And again, as I said at the start, you can buy as much advertising as you'd like in advance. So if that is something that would be of interest to you, if that would be useful, then drop me a line, michael@thisishorror.co.uk. Let's talk. Let's see if we can arrange something that's a good fit for you. Okay, as always, to wrap up, I would like to end with a quote. And this is from George V. Higgins, who is such a fantastic and underrated crime writer, one of the real classics alongside Elmore Leonard. And he is particularly known for his dialogue. It really is fantastic. And here is a quote from him. The quotes make the story. Dialogue is character, and character is plot. I'll see you in the next episode with Ronald Kelly. But until then, take care of yourselves, be good to one another, read horror, keep on writing, and have a great day.
This is Horror Podcast.